Hey guys, tonight we are setting foot very gently, slippers and all, into the delightfully slow world of medieval village life, somewhere out beyond the edge of what most history books even bother to mention. Imagine the sun sinking behind tangled bramble hedges as you trudge along a winding, mud-dappled lane, the air heavy with the earthy scent of peat smoke and sheep. There's a kind of sleepy hush that settles over Bramblewick, the sort of hush only found in a place where time itself seems a little drowsy, and even the cows yawn before bed. Lanterns glow behind thick glass windows, the golden light flickering and trembling, promising stories that slip easily into dreams. But tonight isn't just any night in Bramblewick. No, tonight you're privy. Pun most definitely intended to one of the great mysteries of this otherwise uneventful place, the scandalous affair of the disappearing Chamberpot. If you're new here, a Chamberpot isn't just a relic from a time before indoor plumbing. In medieval homes, it's a vital companion, a porcelain lifeline in the dead of night, and, for some reason, the most prized object in the manor. You might laugh now, but trust me, in a world where chamber pots are precious, their disappearance can cause real bedtime bedlam. You've probably heard tales of knights and dragons and battles, but here, the real challenge is making it through a chilly night without an emergency dash across the yard. Trust me, you probably wouldn't survive this unless you've trained for years in the noble art of holding it till sunrise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as we settle in, I'd love for you to drop your location and local time down in the comments. I always find it magical to see where you're listening from and how many of us are dozing off together, scattered like stars across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that sod background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your evening with a stroll past the mossy manor, nodding to a pair of geese whose greatest ambition is to block your path. The manor's thatched roof hunches in the gloom, and you notice the heavy oak door propped open, just a crack, spilling warmth and voices into the twilight. There's something wonderfully routine about the end-of-day rituals here. You pass a kitchen window where a tired cook polishes apples for tomorrow's tart, humming the same old melody she's hummed since Henry IV lost his last hair. The air is thick with stew, rosemary, and the faint, comforting tang of a place that doesn't believe in hurrying anywhere. Not even to bed. You shuffle inside and find yourself in a timbered hall full of nodding heads. There's old Maudie by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of weak ale, knitting something that might be a scarf, or possibly a trap for mice. Sir Oswald, the knight whose armor squeaks louder than his voice, is already deep in a losing battle with his slippers. Somewhere in the corner, a spaniel snores, oblivious to the slow motion drama about to unfold. There's something, in the gentle chaos. A couple of sleepy scullions scuttle past, arms laden with towels, and the steward quietly counts spoons. Never trust a medieval kitchen to keep count of its spoons. Everyone's winding down, the day's worries melting away like butter on hot bread. It's a scene so soft, you almost forget how important a simple object can be until you catch the hushed whispers. The Chamberpot. Yes, that Chamberpot. Not just any, but the manor's grandest specimen. An earthenware beauty with painted blue flowers and a delicate gold rim that's seen more noble backsides than the king's own throne. Tonight, it waits by the grand staircase, shining in the firelight, an unsung hero of midnight emergencies. If you were hoping for a tale of swordplay and gallantry, you might want to lower your expectations, unless, of course, you think bravery comes in the form of braving a cold, creaky hallway at 3 a.m. But here in Bramblewick, it's the small things, like the nightly ritual of placing the Chamberpot just so at the foot of the stairs that hold the whole household together. Historians still argue whether Chamberpots were truly the centerpiece of medieval social life, but in this manner, their status is unquestioned. There's even a rumor that a Chamberpot once saved the village from scandal, but that's a tale for another night. Tonight, the ritual is unchanged. Maudie gives the pot a final polish. Sir Oswald inspects it with the solemnity of a man knighting a particularly noble sheep, and the household retires, comforted by the knowledge that, should nature call, relief is only a tiptoe away. Little do they know that this night, routine is about to slip into mystery, and you, with your soft slippers and softer curiosity, are here to witness every quiet, ridiculous detail. You find yourself hovering just behind Sir Oswald, the manor's resident knight, who is currently doing battle not with dragons or marauders, but with a pair of stubborn felt slippers. It's one of those moments when history, if it could peek in, might just roll its eyes and go back to bed. Sir Oswald, resplendent in his faded dressing gown and heroic bedhead, seems unaware of your silent presence as he mutters to himself about splinters and chilly floors. You watch as he inches along the creaky corridor, candle in one hand, dignity in the other, and the night pressing close all around. The manor is mostly quiet, save for the odd creak of timber or a faint giggle from the servants' quarters. Somewhere below, the coals in the great hearth sigh and settle, sending up lazy puffs of warmth. But Oswald's mission is deadly serious. To reach the Chamberpot stationed like a trusty sentry at the bottom of the staircase. In medieval homes, this small but vital object saves its owner from far more public trips out to the chilly privy. In the yard, a place rumored to be haunted, or at the very least, deeply uninviting at this hour. Historians still argue whether medieval knights were really as brave as the stories say. But here's a secret: not even a suit of armor makes a privy trip in December feel heroic. There's no recorded tale of Sir Lancelot conquering a drafty outhouse, but you suspect every knight at some point has felt the cold shame of midnight indecision. As Oswald tiptoes, you can practically hear his thoughts. Will the candle last? Will his dignity survive? You trail him past portraits of grim ancestors, their eyes following you, with the particular reproach of those who never had to fumble for a chamber pot in the dark. A tapestry flutters in the draught, showing some ancient family triumph involving turnips, a detail that, frankly, only adds to the sense of drowsy absurdity. By the time Sir Oswald finally rounds the bend to the grand staircase, you're starting to wonder if he'll simply give up and retreat under the covers. But no, he steadies himself, squints at the shadowy landing, and lets out a soft, triumphant ah. The chamber pot, gleaming in the candlelight, is right where it's supposed to be. Its blue flowers and gold rim, looking improbably regal. Oswald parks himself beside it, with the air of a man who has conquered his greatest foe, at least for tonight. You can't help but notice he glances left and right, just in case a wandering ghost or inquisitive mouse is watching. Dignity, after all, is a fragile thing. As he finishes his nocturnal ritual, the air grows chillier, the wind rattling the windows. Somewhere outside, a barn owl gives a sleepy hoot, reminding you that, for all its quirks, medieval life is full of such gentle background music. And just as Oswald rises, attempting to retie his dressing gown, with the seriousness of a man preparing for battle, his slipper catches on the edge of the tapestry. There's a brief, flailing moment, one of those slow-motion disasters you only see when you're not entirely awake. The candle wobbles, the chamber pot teeters for a heartbeat. Time itself seems to pause, holding its breath. With a soft thud, Sir Oswald lands on his seat instead of his feet. But miraculously, both candle and chamber pot survive unscathed. You'd laugh, but out of politeness, you only smile inwardly and file the image away for later. He sighs, gets up, dusts off his pride, and with a final glance at the chamber pot, a look of both gratitude and suspicion, shuffles back down the corridor, slippers scuffing the flagstones. You notice he doesn't quite close the lid all the way, a minor detail that will become oddly significant as the night unfolds. As you drift behind him, you're reminded of a mainstream historical fact. In the days before plumbing, even the grandest homes relied on chamber pots, emptied daily, or not so daily, by servants whose job satisfaction levels were, let's say, a matter of scholarly debate. There are endless records of nobles and servants alike vying for the best, most artistically decorated pots. Some pots were even given as wedding gifts, their painted sides hiding tiny, private jokes. Historians still argue whether these gifts were tokens of love or just a subtle way of reminding newlyweds to mind their manners. Meanwhile, Oswald resumes his journey, bumping gently into a low table and narrowly avoiding a heap of laundry. The old house, with its winding halls and mysterious drafts, seems to be watching too, as if waiting for something. Though, whether it's a ghost, a cat, or a misplaced chamber pot, no one can say for sure. You, however, are beginning to feel the warm fuzziness of the hour. If there is a better cure for insomnia than watching a knight nearly trip over his own dignity, you haven't found it. The candlelight grows softer as Sir Oswald slides back into his chambers, the household once more settling into its gentle breathing. For now, all is peaceful. The chamber pot stands alone on the staircase landing, an unsung hero of sleepy nights and gentle disasters. Yet, as you let your eyes close, you have a sense, a tickle at the back of your mind, that this humble pot's night is far from over. Morning tiptoes into Bramblewick Manor, brushing dew across the window panes and rousing the village roosters to their usual off-key chorus. You wake, blinking at the soft light filtering through the uneven glass, and for a few blessed moments, all seems right in the world. The sounds of the kitchen downstairs, pots clinking, bread thumping onto wooden boards, the gentle murmur of Maudie's morning complaints set a familiar rhythm. The air smells faintly of peat smoke, and something that may or may not be last night's stew, reheated for breakfast. You stretch, relishing the lazy warmth beneath your coarse wool blanket, not knowing that a small domestic crisis is about to upset the sleepy harmony. Somewhere along the landing, you hear the sharp tap-tap of the steward's staff, a sure sign he's on one of his efficiency campaigns. You swing your feet over the side of the bed, just as the household begins to stir, the scullery maids shuffling to fetch water, the stable boy yawning as he stumbles into his boots, and Sir Oswald already grumbling about the lack of decent socks in the century. Today, though, the hum of the manor carries an unfamiliar note, a tension that ripples through the air like a skipped stone. It begins with a shout from the staircase, so sudden and alarmed it makes your heart skip a beat. The voice, high and trembling, belongs to the steward himself, who has just made the worst possible discovery before his first cup of morning ale. The Chamberpot, centerpiece of the manor's nightly comfort, has vanished, gone, disappeared, as if whisked away by elves. Or worse, by the hands of someone closer to home. You pad over to the landing, joining a growing congregation of confused, pajama-clad householders. Sir Oswald, now wide awake, squints at the empty spot where the Chamberpot usually sits in its place of honor. There's a hush, thick with disbelief. Someone coughs. Even the spaniel, who usually spends the morning scratching behind its ears, pauses mid-scratch to look perplexed. Who would steal a Chamberpot? Hisses old Maudie, clutching her apron with knotted fingers. It's not even Tuesday. You feel a tiny surge of excitement, a little ripple of curiosity at this new whodunit, even if the stakes are, let's face it, as low as a medieval floorboard. Still, in an age where entertainment is mostly folk songs and bread with different levels of burnt edges, the vanishing of the household's most precious pot is big news. The search is immediate. The steward, still scandalized, orders every cupboard, closet, and dusty corner to be checked. Beds are turned upside down, linen chests opened, and broom closets inspected with far more seriousness than any of them have ever received before. Sir Oswald, eager to reclaim some dignity after last night's adventures, volunteers to lead the hunt in the East Wing, though he draws the line at investigating under the cook's table after she threatens to wallop him with a wooden spoon. Historians still argue whether the morning routines of medieval manors were as chaotic as the records suggest, or if perhaps chroniclers simply liked to embellish the small household dramas. What's certain is that on mornings like this, when something vital goes missing, the entire social order is upended, at least until breakfast is served. You wander alongside the frantic search party, peeking under benches and behind tapestry hangings. There's something oddly comforting in the way everyone tries and fails to maintain a sense of decorum while poking through each other's belongings. Occasionally, a lost mitten or wayward stocking is recovered, but the Chamberpot remains stubbornly absent. The plot thickens when a fringe character, the youngest scullion, no more than and still half asleep, pipes up with a suggestion that perhaps the cat is to blame. She's always got that guilty look, he mumbles, earning a chorus of snorts. The idea of a cat absconding with a porcelain pot is almost too absurd. But then again, so is most of medieval life when you look closely enough. As the minutes pass, breakfast is all but forgotten. Porridge congeals in bowls. Slices of rough rye go uneaten. The entire household is now united in one shared goal: to find the Chamberpot before the day's chores can truly begin. You catch snippets of whispered theories, some accusing, some joking, a few tinged with real concern. The tension grows, yet somehow the search never tips into real panic. It remains slow, sleepy, and punctuated by yawns. Maybe it's the cold stone beneath your feet, or maybe it's just the steady, low stakes of country life. Amid the confusion, you pause to take in a quirky tidbit. In some households, chamber pots were not only functional, but a mark of wealth and taste, often custom painted and even inscribed with jokes, rhymes, or political barbs. Some were so elaborate they were mentioned in wills or passed down through generations, outliving even the most robust family dogs. Historians still argue whether these prized pots truly reflected status or were simply the product of bored artisans looking to leave a cheeky mark on the world. Literally and figuratively, the morning wears on. The manners search, turning up everything but the lost relic. You can't help but feel a sense of solidarity with these drowsy villagers, so easily thrown into disarray by the vanishing of such a humble yet essential piece of domestic life. In the grand sweep of history, the disappearance of a single chamber pot might not make the chronicles, but here, for a moment, it is everything. And as the sunlight creeps higher, and the kitchen's stew pot begins its steady bubble, the rumor mill churns to life, setting the stage for gossip, finger-pointing, and perhaps, just maybe, the beginnings of a proper medieval scandal. You linger on the edge of a gathering storm, though. Here in Bramblewick Manor, a storm is less thunder and lightning, and more the slow roll of accusations over lukewarm porridge. The moment the missing chamber pot is confirmed, the household transforms. Breakfast becomes a tribunal. There is, naturally, no shortage of suspects. In a house this size, everyone from the Lord's own son to the surliest stable cat is fair game. The only person who seems genuinely above suspicion is the milkmaid, but only because she's out in the fields and nowhere near the crime scene. You settle onto a bench, keen to observe the gentle escalation of blame. Sir Oswald, still embarrassed about his midnight pratfall, shifts uneasily and clears his throat. "I'll have you know," he announces to no one in particular, "I last saw the chamber pot safe and sound at midnight. His voice cracks just slightly, prompting the kitchen boy to snicker into his sleeve. The steward, resplendent in his slightly too tight doublet, takes charge, scribbling names onto a scrap of parchment as suspects are named and dismissed in turn. First up is Old Maudie, who indignantly proclaims that, at her age, she'd sooner walk barefoot through a nettle patch than abscond with a porcelain pot. The cook swears on her life and, more importantly, on her next apple tart, that she's not moved anything except her rolling pin. The household cat, curled in a sunbeam, glares as only a cat can when accused of petty theft. A gentle ripple of laughter makes its way around the room, a release of tension more than a true sign of joy. It's hard, after all, to take a pot-stealing conspiracy too seriously, but no one wants to be the first to shrug off their responsibility. The butler suggests the pot might have been borrowed for cleaning. The scullery maid insists she's only cleaned pots of the culinary variety. The stable boy claims complete ignorance, and Chanda, if you're honest, looks like he hasn't touched a Chamberpot or a bar of soap in months. Historians still argue whether medieval households were truly as prone to finger-pointing and gossip as their modern reputations suggest. Some chroniclers, possibly bored with the endless accounting of harvests and feast days, delighted in documenting every tiny scandal, from missing spoons to love affairs involving roast chickens. What's clear is that, in the absence of television or TikTok, a missing chamber pot is more than enough to set tongues wagging. You watch as the tension ebbs and flows. The initial blame game evolves into a gentle group investigation. The kitchen staff reenact their movements with dramatic flair. Maudie clutching her apron. The cook wielding a carrot like a detective's magnifying glass. The steward, caught between exasperation and amusement, directs everyone to check under beds, behind curtains, and inside every suspiciously lumpy pile of laundry. There is a thoroughness to the proceedings that, in any other context, would be impressive. Occasionally, a new clue is found: an abandoned slipper, a dropped handkerchief, the suspicious remains of last night's pudding, but never the elusive Chamberpot. You can't help but notice how suspicion shifts from person to person, never settling for long, as if the very idea of someone being truly guilty is almost too much for the house to bear. A quirky detail catches your attention. In some parts of medieval Europe, especially in fancier homes, chamber pots were so prized that owners would engrave their initials or even commission tiny, hand-painted portraits on the lid. Imagine, for a moment, the lord of the manor immortalized forever, not in stone, but in ceramic, gracing a humble pot meant for decidedly undignified purposes. Historians still argue whether these decorations were meant to deter theft or simply add a bit of humor to a grim necessity. As the investigation wears on, the household grows sleepier, frustration replaced by yawning acceptance. The initial flurry of questions slows to a gentle trickle. Someone suggests perhaps the chamber pot will simply reappear as mysteriously as it vanished when it's ready. Another suggests perhaps it ran away of its own accord, finally fed up with the indignities of its existence. Even the cat, no longer under suspicion, closes her eyes and begins to dream of far more exciting heists. For now, the chamber pot remains missing, but in its absence, the manor finds a kind of togetherness, if not in trust, then at least in shared inconvenience, with the whole household resigned, at least temporarily, to the mystery. You find your mind wandering to the role this humble Chamberpot played in the daily and nightly rhythm of Bramblewick Manor. You follow the murmured conversations into the shadowy corners of the house, watching as the practicalities of medieval hygiene resurface. What's a person to do, after all, when the closest alternative is a rickety outhouse perched in the farthest, muddiest corner of the yard? You notice the manor's residents exchanging uneasy glances. The absence of the Chamberpot isn't just an inconvenience. It's a disruption of the night's fragile comfort. Without it, you sense a subtle anxiety growing behind every stifled yawn. There's even talk, quiet but persistent, of who will draw the short straw and brave the freezing darkness if the missing pot doesn't reappear in a world without plumbing. Such details could make or break a good night's sleep. You pad through the chilly corridor, slippers barely whispering on the flagstones, and catch snippets of grumbling from Sir Oswald, who now claims to have invented a new form of nightly vigilance, staying awake just in case the pot's thief makes a second move. Old Maudie, with her own brand of dry humor, mutters that she hasn't had this much excitement since the day the village goose mistook her knitting for a nest. There's camaraderie in the inconvenience, but also an undertone of desperation. If there's one thing that brings a manor together, it's a shared bathroom emergency. As the morning stretches on, you consider a mainstream historical fact. Before the arrival of Chamberpots, the only options for most people were makeshift arrangements, outdoor privies, buckets, or, for the truly desperate, a hasty trip to the nearest hedge. Chamberpots represented a leap forward, a small luxury that set wealthier households apart from their poorer neighbors. Some were so prized that they featured not only artwork, but even silver trim, a quirky status symbol for the most discerning nighttime visitor. Still, there were consequences to such luxury. You overhear the cook sharing a particularly fringe tidbit with the kitchen staff. In some towns, Chamberpot contents were thrown out of upstairs windows, sometimes accompanied by a warning shout. Hence the phrase "Gardy-loo," uttered before a cascade of unpleasantness rained down on unwary passers-by below. Historians still argue whether the average pedestrian really stood a decent chance of dodging such nightly offerings, or if it was just an urban legend invented to scare children into obedience. You walk out to the kitchen garden, where even the vegetables seem to gossip in the breeze. A pair of hens cluck disapprovingly at the ongoing scandal, as if they, too, miss the comforting regularity of the nightly pot. There's a sense that without it, the entire manor is just a bit less secure, a bit more susceptible to the chaos lurking at the edge of every night. At midday, you wander back inside to find the manor's adults huddled around a battered wooden table, improvising a solution. A rota for using the rarely visited outdoor privy. Sir Oswald volunteers first, making a grand show of sharpening his sword beforehand, just in case of bandits or, worse, a lurking badger. The children, meanwhile, are less concerned with hygiene than with the opportunity to spook each other with tales of haunted toilets and ancient curses. Someone claims the last person to visit the privy alone disappeared for hours, only to return, clutching a mysterious turnip and refusing to explain. The loss of the Chamberpot is starting to feel almost mythical, the kind of thing bards might sing about in jest at winter feasts. The great Bramblewick pot. Caper. You imagine the song would go, or the night everyone wished they drank less ale. Still, practical matters prevail, and before long, the rota is posted by the hearth, a testament to the manor's ability to adapt, however reluctantly, to misfortune. As you curl up in a drafty window seat, you realize the Chamberpot's absence has revealed the household's underlying resilience. Where there was once routine, there is now improvisation. Where there was embarrassment, there is now shared laughter. And where there was certainty, there is now a nagging, unanswered question. Who took the pot and why? But for now, as the sun climbs higher and the world grows a little warmer, you let yourself drift, soothed by the soft sounds of a house, determined to carry on, even or especially when the basics of comfort go missing. It's well past breakfast when you find yourself ambling back to the main hall, drawn by the muffled clatter of wooden bowls and the low, persistent hum of speculation. In Bramblewick Manor, mealtime is more than sustenance. It's the day's center stage, where gossip is served right alongside gruel. As you slip onto a creaky bench, you catch the tail end of a spirited debate about whether last year's grain harvest was better than the year before, only for the conversation to quickly swerve back to the missing Chamberpot. As ever, drama in this house is like steam from a kettle. It finds its way into every nook. You watch as Sir Oswald, now fortified by 3 helpings of porridge, attempts to bring order to the breakfast table. He raises a spoon like a scepter. We mustn't allow ourselves to be ruled by fear. And he pauses, searching for the right word. Discomfort. This bold pronouncement earns him a round of snorts from the kitchen maids and a slow, ironic clap from the stable boy, who has evidently not yet forgiven Oswald for yesterday's emergency borrowing of his boots. Between bites, the household theorizes wildly. The cook, elbow deep in her morning kneading, floats the idea that the culprit might be a jealous rival manor. They always did envy our blue-flowered porcelain, she says with mock seriousness, earning laughter all around. The butler wonders aloud if the pot might have simply grown legs, like the legendary tales of enchanted teapots that wander off in fairy stories. This gets a nod from old Maudie, who claims to have once seen a candlestick crawl across the mantelpiece during a thunderstorm. Historians still argue whether such tales were clever inventions to explain away lost possessions, or the product of too much cider and not enough fresh air. Meanwhile, the gossip trickles through every conversation. You lean closer and overhear a pair of laundry maids whispering about the possibility of a love-struck suitor borrowing the pot as a grand romantic gesture. A theory they find hilarious, but not impossible, considering the shortage of proper love tokens in this part of the country. The steward, ever the voice of reason, shakes his head. No one in their right mind would steal a chamber pot for love. Surely, then again, medieval courtship had its share of oddities, from carved turnips to mysterious riddles, so perhaps nothing is too strange to contemplate. You can't help but notice the cook's eye lingering on the stairwell, as if half expecting the pot to roll down the steps in triumphant return. You glance there too, half hoping for a dramatic reappearance, but the space remains stubbornly empty. The chamber pot, for now, has taken on the status of a ghost, unseen, but never absent from conversation. There's something deeply communal in this collective worry. The manor, for all its hierarchy, has become equalized by this shared inconvenience. Jokes are exchanged as freely as suspicions. Even the cat, who by now has moved on to stalking a bit of string, becomes the subject of a playful accusation from one of the children. She's the only one small enough to fit in the laundry chest. This, of course, devolves into giggles and a brief, spirited chase around the table. You savor a moment of quirky historical context. In some medieval households, chamber pots were decorated not just with patterns or crests, but with biting rhymes or caricatures of disliked neighbors. Sometimes the humor was so sharp it led to mild feuds between households, sparking decades-long rivalries based on nothing more than a joke at the bottom of a bowl. Historians still argue whether these pots served as clever social commentary, or if they were simply an outlet for pent-up boredom during the endless winter months. By midday, the gossip has begun to mellow, turning from wild accusations to tired speculation. The cook, seeing no sign of the pot, offers an extra helping of bread and honey as consolation, declaring, "It's impossible to be grumpy with your mouth full." And for a moment, you sense the truth of it. With hands sticky and bellies full, the manor relaxes its grip on the mystery, allowing laughter to replace suspicion. You notice Sir Oswald deep in thought, absent-mindedly stirring his porridge long after it's gone cold. He looks around the table, as if memorizing the faces of potential pot-nappers. His eyes linger on the steward, the cook, and finally, you. There's an almost conspiratorial glint in his gaze, as though he suspects everyone and no one at all. The breakfast bowls are cleared. The gossip lingers like steam, and the manners day creaks forward. You stretch, full and content, and find yourself once again swept up in the oddly comforting cadence of Bramblewick life. A world where even a missing Chamberpot can become a legend, retold with ever more creative embellishments each time it passes from mouth to mouth. By now, the tale of the missing Chamberpot has seeped through the manor's thick stone walls and out into the world beyond. You step out into the brightening village square, shoes crunching over gravel, and immediately sense the news has traveled fast, perhaps carried on the wind, perhaps via the baker's niece, who is known for her talent in collecting and distributing juicy morsels of household drama. The market stalls are just waking up, baskets of wilted greens and fresh loaves laid out for sale. But all anyone seems to want is the latest update on the scandal at the manor. You sidle up to a cluster of villagers, their voices hushed but animated, as if the fate of the pot is of urgent, kingdom-wide importance. The blacksmith, a barrel-chested man with a voice like rolling thunder, is convinced this is the work of outsiders, maybe bandits or those sneaky folks from the neighboring hamlet of Pebbleton. You never can trust a Pebbleton lad with anything finer than a tin mug, he declares. The shepherd, who's lived in Bramblewick longer than the oldest yew tree, shakes her head in gentle disagreement. It's just mischief. I tell you, Pot's probably hiding behind the flour sacks, waiting for everyone to tire themselves out. As you listen, you realize the Chamberpot affair has become an opportunity for the whole village to air old suspicions and minor grievances. The butcher wonders aloud whether the incident is linked to last month's missing sausages, while the cooper suggests it could be revenge. For that time, the manor forgot to pay him for a new barrel. It's all terribly sleepy, and you marvel at how easily a simple household mishap grows into a shared saga. Historians still argue whether rural communities in the Middle Ages really relied so heavily on gossip to build their collective identity, or if these accounts are the product of later romantic imaginations. What's certain is that a good story, especially one that can be retold and embellished, binds a village together in a way that little else can. You join the crowd as it drifts toward the bakery, where a dozen sticky buns are rapidly exchanged for a dozen fresh rumors. Even the baker's dog, a sleepy old hound with more gray than brown in his coat, seems alert to the excitement, raising his head at each mention of the infamous pot Theories swirl in the morning air. Some claim the pot was spirited away by fairies. Others blame bored manor children. The local priest, passing by with a loaf of barley bread, wryly notes that perhaps the pot was taken as divine punishment for someone's gluttony last Sunday, earning chuckles and a few mock looks of scandalized horror. You spot Sir Oswald ambling down the lane, looking slightly flustered under the weight of so many curious stares. He tries to brush off the villagers' questions with dignity, but soon finds himself recounting last night's events with growing dramatic flair, omitting his tumble and casting himself instead as the steadfast guardian of household order. The children, sensing a chance for mischief, quietly follow him back up the road, chattering about hidden passageways and secret doors. A quirky bit of local color emerges as you pass the village green. One of the elders insists that this is not the first time Bramblewick has faced such a scandal. Back in my day, he says, we lost 3 butter churns in a single week. Turned out, the culprit was a goose with a fondness for shiny things. Historians still debate whether animals were ever truly responsible for village thefts, or if blaming livestock was simply a convenient way to save face. Back at the manor, the household's troubles have become the village's favorite new form of entertainment. Instead of sympathy, the family receives a steady stream of well-meaning advice, some helpful, some entirely ridiculous. Suggestions range from try setting a trap with breadcrumbs to perhaps a song will lure it home. As midday approaches, you sense the story has grown beyond its humble origins. What started as a lost pot is now a full-blown saga, knitting together the manor and the village. Every neighbor drawn in by the promise of a gentle mystery. No one seems particularly upset, if anything. The missing pot has brought a spirit of camaraderie and shared mischief that would otherwise have lain dormant. And you, caught up in the sleepy swirl, can't help but wonder how long it will before someone adds a verse about the Chamberpot to the village's next festival song. After the village's lively speculation, you meander back through the manor gates, basking in the gentle hush that always seems to return after a collective excitement. The halls of Bramblewick feel just a bit more electric than usual, though every sideways glance and whispered conversation, a subtle acknowledgement that, for once, no one really knows what's going on. The missing Chamberpot has become a kind of sleepy obsession. By mid-afternoon, with the search party flagging and the last of the bread crusts gone from the table, a new batch of evidence emerges. The cook, always first to detect a whiff of scandal, claims to have spotted muddy footprints leading from the side door to the pantry. A detail the stable boy seizes upon eagerly. It was the steward. He's always in the pantry after hours. The accused, red-faced, but calm, defends his honor by pointing out that his boots have been by the fire all morning, suspiciously untouched by mud. Historians still argue whether household drama in the Middle Ages ever actually led to full-blown investigations, or if most mysteries fizzled out when someone remembered where they last set an object down. You linger at the edges of these cross-examinations, amused by how quickly serious inquiry gives way to comic theater. Sir Oswald, self-appointed detective, sets about interviewing the staff with all the intensity of a knight preparing for a tournament, albeit with much more yawning and a rather limp feather quill. He jots down notes, scribbling dramatic headlines like Chamberpot Conspiracy and Suspect List. Everyone before promptly losing the parchment under a pile of drying herbs. A few promising leads, like a mysterious splash mark on the stair, or a half-eaten oatcake near the broom closet, prove to be nothing more than household clutter. At one point, a hopeful commotion erupts when old Maudie declares she's found the pot under a stack of old cloaks in the coat room. But when everyone gathers, she sheepishly reveals she's only uncovered an empty water bucket, which is, as the cook dryly observes, the most disappointing plot twist since the bishop's Lent sermon. There's something endearing about the manor's collective ineptitude at detective work. Accusations ping from room to room, bouncing off the kitchen's stone walls and echoing down shadowy corridors. You hear talk of secret tunnels. Every good manor is rumored to have at least one, and wild stories of a hidden door behind the great tapestry in the drawing room. A couple of the braver children attempt to wiggle through the fireplace, convinced the culprit must have made a dramatic escape. You pause to savor a quirky historical tidbit. In some noble households, particularly in France and Italy, there were indeed secret priest holes and hidden passageways, though mostly used to shelter clergy during dangerous times, not to spirit away bathroom fixtures. Historians still argue whether stories of manor mysteries are rooted in these real hiding places, or are mostly the stuff of fireside tales spun to amuse bored listeners on winter nights. As dusk approaches, the cast of suspects grows rather than shrinks. The Chamberpot's absence is now linked by nothing more than imagination to everything from last month's missing chess piece to the faint smell of onions in the cellar. Even the local cat, previously cleared, is again eyed with suspicion after being spotted napping near the pantry, tail twitching in apparent satisfaction. Despite the lack of real progress, there's a sleepy delight in the spectacle. The household, distracted from chores and squabbles, comes together in their shared uncertainty, laughter echoing through the high, smoky rafters. The search itself is more comforting than the answer could ever be, and you find yourself lulled by the slow swirl of confusion. Content just to drift from one half-baked theory to the next. Night falls. Softly, lamps lit one by one along the halls, and the manor settles once more into its gentle, companionable routine. The Chamberpot remains missing, but its absence has knit the household tighter than ever, binding everyone in a tapestry of gentle chaos, whispered jokes, and endless possibility as the last pale rays of afternoon sunlight slip from the leaded windows. Something extraordinary happens. The missing Chamberpot makes a surprise return. You're lingering by the kitchen hearth, watching Sir Oswald attempt to organize a final, definitive search, when a shriek of delight rings out from the top of the stairs. Everyone rushes to the landing. Cook, scullery maids, stable boy, even the skeptical steward, and there, sitting neatly in its usual spot, as if nothing at all had transpired, is the infamous blue-flowered pot. For a moment, the entire manor falls into a hushed awe, as if a minor miracle has occurred. The cook claps her flour-dusted hands and cries, "Bless the saints." Sir Oswald, half convinced he's still dreaming, approaches the pot with the caution of a man encountering a sleeping bear. Old Maudie makes the sign of the cross and mutters that she never doubted its return. The children squeal with delight, then promptly lose interest and start chasing the cat, who, as always, pretends not to care. The joy of rediscovery quickly melts into a wave of questions. Who put it back? Did anyone see? Was it here all along? Theories bubble up like stew in a hot pot. The steward inspects the prized relic with an intensity usually reserved for royal decrees. No cracks, no scratches, just a faint whiff of lavender soap. He seems almost disappointed that the mystery is now, perhaps, solved. But just as everyone begins to breathe easier and laugh off the ordeal, an observant kitchen maid gasps, "Wait, where's the second pot?" For in all the commotion, the household's less decorative, plain brown Chamberpot, used by the night staff and kept by the side entrance, has vanished. A hush descends, as if the household is caught in an endless loop of minor disaster. Historians still argue whether medieval homes ever really endured such farcical cycles of loss and rediscovery, or if our fondness for domestic drama has exaggerated these incidents in the retelling. But here, now, you sense a fresh current of mild chaos swirling through the halls. The cook, usually unflappable, looks as if she's about to throw in her apron for the day. Sir Oswald, recovering his nightly composure, suggests a rotation system. One pot lost, one pot found. It's only fair. The steward refuses to be drawn into further debate, muttering that pots have minds of their own, and no amount of management will tame them. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. in the grand households of Italy. It was not uncommon for the night staff to borrow chamberpots and blame their disappearance on mischievous spirits, or the occasional drunken poet. Sometimes a returned pot would be mysteriously cleaner or, oddly enough, full of rose petals. Historians still argue whether this was a sign of secret assignations or just a roundabout way of settling household debts, with one pot returned and another now missing. The manor's energy shifts yet again. The laughter is a little softer, the jokes a little more tired, but there's a strange comfort in the persistence of the mystery. The missing chamber pot, now a character in its own right, has developed a reputation for unpredictability, and the household's response is nothing short of resigned amusement. You notice the steward posting a new pot watch list on the pantry door, complete with names and shifts, while Sir Oswald volunteers for the midnight patrol. The children lobby for the next turn, arguing that their youth and agility make them uniquely qualified to spot a runaway pot. The cook proposes that, in the future, all chamber pots be fitted with bells, the better to hear you with, my dear, she quips, eliciting a round of sleepy laughter as the manor settles into the gentle clamor of yet another search. You find yourself charmed by the rolling cycle of disappearance and return. It's not the solution anyone was hoping for, but it is, in its own gentle way, the heart of Bramblewick's sleepy routine, an ever-turning wheel of small mishaps, shared suspicion, and the comfort of solving nothing at all. You drift through the manor as the sun sets, the household still buzzing with theories and fatigue, with one chamber pot restored to its rightful place, and another now vanished. People have begun to see the whole affair less as a crisis and more as an oddly satisfying distraction from everyday monotony. The incident has grown so outlandish that it's become a shared joke, one that everyone is in on, but no one can solve. As twilight deepens, you catch snippets of conversation that tumble from room to room. Old Maudie, never short of an opinion, shakes her head and says, "In all my years, I've never seen pots move so much as this week. Except that time, the pig got into the kitchen, but at least then, we knew who was to blame." Her audience, a trio of laundry maids, laughs and shares stories of past household absurdities, from the case of the wandering candlestick to the infamous butter-churning mishap. You pause by the parlor, where the lord of the manor is deep in discussion with the steward. "This is an embarrassment of the highest order," the lord says, though you sense a hint of reluctant amusement in his voice. The steward assures him that no one outside the house will hear the true story. But as you well know, the tale is already halfway to Pebbleton, and likely being retold with extra flourishes about ghosts and nightly curses. Meanwhile, Sir Oswald, never one to pass up a chance at heroics, even of the most domestic sort, has devised a new plan. You watch as he drafts a pot watch rota, assigning each member of the household to keep a lookout for suspicious movement, creaky floorboards, or any sudden breeze that might suggest a pot on the move. The idea, equal parts serious and absurd, is met with eye rolls and giggles, but no one protests too much. Anything that keeps spirits up during a long autumn evening is a welcome diversion. The evening meal passes in a gentle blur, conversation turning from wild guesses to resigned acceptance. The cook serves a hearty stew, declaring that a full belly is better for patience and for chasing pots, if need be. The children launch a new round of theories about the missing pot. Some say it's an elaborate prank by the manor ghosts. Others, that the cat is leading a secret underground society of kleptomaniac mice. You join in the laughter, enjoying the way the impossible ideas are received with the same weight as the likely ones. A mainstream historical fact lingers in your mind. In many medieval homes, cleanliness was less a virtue than a logistical challenge. Water was precious, soap a luxury, and creative solutions abounded for the unending cycle of daily hygiene. Chamberpots, while humble, represented a compromise, one that kept people inside and out of the cold, but also required someone every morning to brave the task of emptying them. Historians still argue whether this chore fell mostly to servants, or whether, in smaller homes, it was shared by all. In Bramblewick, the answer seems to be whoever loses the daily bet. As you listen, a fringe tidbit emerges from the kitchen. Apparently, in the grand courts of Burgundy, chamber pots could be borrowed as tokens of trust left with a neighbor or visiting guest. Their safe return a sign of good manners and mutual respect. Historians still argue whether this was simply a practical solution or if there was a touch of ceremony involved. The mundane raised, however briefly, to the level of ritual. Night grows deeper, and with it, the manor's energy shifts. People start to yawn in unison, the glow from the hearth settling into a dull amber haze. You find yourself in the quiet of a side hallway, following the soft echo of your own footsteps and reflecting on the manor's resilience. No one has lost their temper or cast real blame. If anything, the missing pot has become an accidental bonding exercise. You spot Sir Oswald returning from his first official pot patrol, cape askew and slippers firmly on. All clear, he announces, with the gravity of a man reporting the borders secure from Viking invasion. The rest of the household smiles indulgently, grateful not for answers, but for the comfort of routine and the shared, peculiar joy of turning a small inconvenience into a legendary household adventure. As the lamps are snuffed one by one and the soft hush of night wraps around the manor. You settle in too, wondering what small surprise the next day will bring. And all the while, the Chamberpot saga lingers unsolved, but utterly unforgettable. You wake to a low murmur drifting through the manor, softer than usual, but charged with the sleepy thrill of fresh developments. Morning sunlight filters through the mullioned windows, painting golden shapes on the flagstone floors as you join the gathering crowd near the main stairs. Today's atmosphere is different, less fraught with suspicion, more tinged with curiosity, as if everyone is finally enjoying the spectacle that their everyday lives so rarely provide. The latest rumor comes from the garden boy, who claims to have seen something unusual near the rose bushes at dawn. A flash of white and blue, a glint of porcelain among the dewy leaves. His audience hangs on every word, eager for the story to take a turn. Any turn, whether toward resolution or even more delightful confusion. You follow the crowd as they trickle outdoors, the sleepy manor temporarily united in hope and mild anticipation. In the chilly morning air, a small search party forms. Sir Oswald, the cook, 2 scullery maids, the garden boy, and you, ever the unseen observer. The group fans out across the lawn, poking through hedges and peering behind flower pots with more determination than any of them summoned during yesterday's investigation. There's a certain camaraderie in this communal mission, a sense of purpose, however ridiculous, that lifts the usual morning fog. At last, a cry goes up from the far side of the garden. Everyone rushes over, nearly trampling the herb bed in their eagerness. There, nestled behind a particularly prickly bush, sits the missing brown chamberpot, slightly muddy, but otherwise intact. The cook retrieves it with a triumphant flourish, holding it aloft like a relic. For a moment, even the birds seem to chirp in applause. Historians still argue whether household items, once lost, were often recovered in such dramatic fashion, or whether, in truth, they more commonly vanished forever, claimed by time or careless hands. The Bramblewick version, full of twists, turns, and unlikely reunions, seems custom-built for retelling on slow winter nights. Back indoors, the household is buoyed by the return of the prodigal pot. The cook scrubs it clean. The steward updates the rota with a flourish, and Sir Oswald gives a mock speech about the bravery shown by all in the face of household adversity. The children insist the pot must have gone on an adventure of its own, perhaps to visit distant cousins in the next manor over. But the episode isn't quite over yet. A new rumor begins to ripple. Someone claims to have seen a figure shrouded in night clothes, sneaking across the garden in the wee hours. Was this the true culprit? Was the entire escapade a sleepwalking mishap, or a deliberate prank gone too far? The manor's imagination runs willow. The stable boy suggests it was old Maudie in disguise. The scullery maids are convinced it was Sir Oswald. Sleep night extraordinaire. You pause to savor a quirky historical fact. In some great households, sleepwalking was seen as a sign of spiritual unrest, a soul troubled by unfinished business, or too much pickled herring before bed. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect genuine beliefs or just a convenient way to explain away the more embarrassing episodes of nocturnal mischief. The morning fades into afternoon, laughter mingling with the scent of baking bread and roasting turnips. As the sun climbs, you notice a certain lightness in every step, the burden of suspicion finally replaced by the gentle pride of a mystery, solved at least for now. The Chamberpots are both accounted for, and Bramblewick's gentle rhythm resumes, interrupted only by the occasional giggle when someone passes the spot where the brown pot was found. And yet, with the search concluded, you sense a subtle nostalgia settling in, a reluctance to let go of the excitement, the shared purpose, and the warm absurdity of the scandal. Life returns to normal, but the echoes of the pot's disappearance linger, soft as the dust motes in the sunlit halls. With both Chamberpots returned, a mellow relief flows through Bramblewick, like the last notes of a lullaby. You glide through the manor's gentle afterglow, watching as its inhabitants savor the calm that only follows the resolution of a well-drawn-out mystery. Daily routines pick up where they left off. Bread is kneaded, floors swept, beds turned down, and the air is thick with soft laughter and grateful sighs. Yet, just beneath the surface, the memory of the great Chamberpot caper bubbles, ready to spill over with the next sly remark or knowing glance. Sir Oswald, ever eager to turn fiasco into folklore, now regales anyone who will listen with his personal account of the investigation. In his telling, of course, he is equal parts mastermind and intrepid hero, though the children gleefully interrupt with reminders of his infamous midnight tumble. The household listens, occasionally rolling their eyes, but always with smiles curling at the corners of their mouths. You find yourself lingering at the fringes of these retellings, catching every playful exaggeration and cheerful embellishment. At lunch, the manor is almost festive. The cook serves up extra slices of apple tart, declaring nothing celebrates a solved mystery like dessert. The children reenact the saga with wooden spoons and upturned buckets, their reenactments growing more outlandish with each retelling. Old Maudie, arms folded, offers a running commentary from her seat by the fire, suggesting next time they lose something, it should be the butter churn instead. Laughter swells and fills the space between bites of tart, the echo of suspicion replaced by a cozy camaraderie. a mainstream historical fact floats to mind. In larger medieval households, domestic crises, lost keys, misplaced candlesticks, and yes, missing chamber pots were sometimes immortalized in song or rhyme, transforming everyday mishaps into the stuff of local legend. It's said that clever maids or mischievous scullions would compose ditties to lighten the mood or poke fun at the high and mighty. Historians still argue whether these household ballads were ever recorded or simply passed down in whispers, lost as soon as the next scandal arose. You catch a glimpse of the steward updating his precious rota, taking special care to note the pot's locations and assign new watchers. His careful script, you suspect, is less about security and more about maintaining a sense of order, a reassuring illusion in a world where even the humblest objects can spark mayhem. The cook, catching your glance, shrugs and jokes. Give it a week. Someone will misplace a candlestick, and we'll all be at it again. A quirky tidbit emerges from old Maudie as you settle beside her for a moment's rest. She leans in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, in some towns, they say if you lose your chamber pot, it means you'll come into a bit of luck, though. I'd rather take the luck and keep the pot if it's all the same. You sense the blend of superstition and humor is the very lifeblood of Bramblewick, a reminder that every disaster is just a new story in the making. Throughout the afternoon, sunlight drifts across the flagstones, illuminating the ordinary, now tinged with the extraordinary. The cats bask in pools of golden light. The dogs sprawl lazily under the kitchen table. And outside, the first leaves of autumn swirl along the paths. Even the geese, usually so haughty, seem content to waddle quietly, as if aware that the household's peace has been restored. Historians still argue whether medieval life was truly as simple and communal as we wish to remember, or whether these moments of togetherness are only the brightest stitches in a larger Messier tapestry. Yet here, within Bramblewick's gentle hush, you feel the truth. Every household, in every age, is held together by its shared stories, its laughter, and the odd, enduring mystery of a vanishing pot. You stretch, letting the warmth of the kitchen seep into your bones, and listen to the final chords of the chamber pot saga fading into gentle memory, a comfort to carry you through the night and perhaps into dreams of your own. By the following day, Bramblewick has slid back into its familiar, drowsy routine, though a soft ripple of mischief lingers, like the aftertaste of a very mild, very medieval joke. You rise with the gentle clamor of breakfast bread crusts scraped, ale poured, spoons clinking in porridge bowls, and sense that the manor is at last content. Still, you catch glimmers of sly grins and catchphrases passed from one sleepy head to another. The Chamberpot affair has left behind a treasure trove of inside jokes and a peculiar sort of pride. As you drift through the house, you notice how everyone, in their own subtle way, honors the events of the past days. The children, ringleaders of mischief, tiptoe past the kitchen with exaggerated caution, giggling and glancing back as if expecting the ghostly pot to leap out from behind a barrel. The cook, stirring her famous stew, claims she's added a dash of mystery to today's recipe, which sets the maids into a fit of laughter. Even the stable boy, who was never entirely cleared of suspicion, wears his most innocent look and whistles a tuneless tune. There's a new ritual in place, 2 every evening, before the fire is banked and the candles snuffed. Someone is tasked with a ceremonial pot check. Sir Oswald takes the role especially seriously, brandishing a walking stick like a scepter as he inspects both chamber pots, now resting in their rightful places. The formality is all for show, but it's become the Manor's favorite running joke. Part parade, part performance, and wholly irresistible to anyone with even a hint of imagination. A mainstream historical fact settles into your thoughts in the great houses of Europe. Rituals like this, born from moments of crisis, often took root and became family tradition. Lost keys, runaway livestock, missing pies, and even mislaid pots found their way into the everyday liturgy. Their stories repeated at feasts and winter hearths. Historians still argue whether these traditions strengthened household bonds or were simply an excuse for gentle mockery and memory-keeping. As you join the household for the evening meal, you notice how the memory of the missing pot has drawn people together. Sir Oswald regales everyone with a blow-by-blow account of his nightly vigil, carefully editing out the part where he almost tripped over his own feet. Old Maudie contributes her own version, insisting she was on the verge of unmasking the culprit when the pot mysteriously returned itself. The children's tales are the most colorful, full of talking cats, invisible hands, and heroic turnips. From the shadows, you hear a whisper of a new rumor. Perhaps the pot was never stolen at all, but simply tired of its old life, seeking adventure in the wilds of the garden and under the laundry chests. The notion grows into a running story. Each evening, someone adds a fresh detail. A narrow escape from a fox, a moonlit journey along the garden path. What began as an inconvenience has blossomed into a tale that everyone wants to claim a piece of. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. In some country manors, when a much-used household object ran away, the family would invent fantastical stories about its adventures, telling them for generations. Historians still argue whether these tales were comforting lies for bored children or a subtle way to transform loss into laughter and memory. You marvel at how much joy can be spun from the slenderest of threads. A missing pot, a shared search, a round of jokes at the dinner table. The laughter lingers, a soft glow against the chill of autumn, promising that long after the details are forgotten, the spirit of the story will remain. And you, in the gentle hush that follows, feel yourself a part of the sleepy, silly, and deeply human history of Bramblewick. As the next week unfolds, you notice how the scandalous affair of the disappearing Chamberpot becomes less about the object itself and more about what it has stirred up in the hearts of Bramblewick's residents. Gone is the prickly unease and awkward blame. In its place blooms a cheerful camaraderie rooted in their shared adventure. The manor, once divided by suspicion and endless "did you take it?" glances, now basks in an easy warmth that even the chill of autumn can't quite dispel. You drift through the manor and find its rhythm subtly changed. At breakfast, conversation no longer revolves around chores or the weather, but instead about who would play whom in the inevitable pot drama if a wandering bard ever decided to put it on stage. Sir Oswald, enjoying his newfound role as a local legend, insists on being played by himself. No actor could capture his heroic vigilance, he claims, earning affectionate eye rolls from the kitchen staff. Old Maudie suggests the Chamberpot should have a speaking role, preferably with a dramatic soliloquy at the climax. The children, of course, begin composing songs, tuneless and silly, but sung with wild enthusiasm as midday sunlight stretches through the dusty windows. The story begins to mutate, as all the best tales do. Some say the pot's disappearance was an act of magic. Others, that it was a test of the household's unity. A kitchen maid spins a tale in which the Chamberpot was recruited by fairies for an urgent mission to the center of the earth. The stable boy claims, in his version, that the pot outwitted a cunning fox and returned home a hero. The cook's story is the most practical, she maintains. The pot simply took a holiday, got homesick, and found its own way back. Amid the banter, you notice how even the household's smallest tasks now hum with fresh energy. Sweeping the hearth becomes an occasion for sly winks and stage whispers about secret pot tunnels. Tidying the linen closet is performed with a detective's flair, just in case another object is plotting its escape. These rituals, performed with a knowing smile, bind the household together in subtle, invisible threads. A mainstream historical fact tickles your mind. Medieval households, especially those as lively as Bramblewick, relied on oral tradition to pass the time, lift spirits, and remind everyone of their place in the family's tapestry. Over the years, small incidents grew into legendary stories, retold and reshaped by each new voice at the table. Historians still argue whether this was a way to make peace with the unpredictability of daily life, or simply a natural outgrowth of the human need for entertainment and belonging. You pause near the garden door and catch Sir Oswald mid-rehearsal for what he claims will be his grand soliloquy at next month's harvest feast. His voice, noble and mock tragic, carries through the apple-scented air as he addresses the invisible Chamberpot with grave dignity. "O vessel of necessity, thou hast returned," he declaims, as the children burst into giggles nearby. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts. In some corners of Europe, particularly in isolated villages, a lost and found song would be sung after the safe return of a prized object, no matter how humble. Each verse might detail the object's imagined journey, bravely crossing rivers, befriending wild animals, or foiling would-be thieves before finally making its way back home. Historians still argue whether such songs ever helped locate truly lost items, or whether their only purpose was to give people a reason to laugh and celebrate together. As the day winds down, you feel the story settling in, no longer a source of tension, but a badge of honor and a spark for the household's imagination. The Chamberpot, once simply a tool of necessity, has become a household mascot, an unlikely symbol of unity and joy. You marvel at the resilience of Bramblewick, its gentle humor, and the way even the smallest scandal can sow seeds of connection that will linger long after the details are lost to time. Autumn deepens over Bramblewick, and you sense the last chapters of the Chamberpot saga gently closing around the household. The excitement has faded to a pleasant memory as golden leaves gather in corners of the garden, and the evenings grow longer, softer, and more filled with laughter than before. The pots themselves have settled into their old, humble places, each now greeted with a pet or a wink, as if in recognition of their brief, storied fame. You find yourself perched by the kitchen hearth one evening, soaking in the easy conversation that drifts across the warm stone floor. The children are composing an epic about the traveling pot, their rhymes wobbly, but their enthusiasm unwavering. The cook listens in, peeling apples with a contented smile, and occasionally tossing in a suggestion for a rhyme. Try not with but a dear old Maudie, never far from the heart of manor life, volunteers to be the story's narrator, though she insists on giving the Chamberpot the voice of a misunderstood philosopher, Sir Oswald. His reputation, forever tied to the saga, has become a kind of local celebrity, more often asked for his take on the pot caper than on matters of actual importance. He takes this with mock seriousness, bowing grandly each time someone thanks him for his vigilance. You notice how he lingers by the main staircase in the evening, giving the blue-flowered pot an affectionate nod before retiring. It's become a private ritual, a silent thank you to the little hero of Bramblewick. As the days pass, a new rhythm takes hold. The pots are checked, as always, but no one expects a repeat performance. Instead, their presence has become a gentle joke, a reference dropped into conversation whenever something else goes missing. Perhaps it's gone adventuring with the Chamberpot. Someone quips when a wooden spoon can't be found. The phrase is always good for a round of sleepy laughter. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Even the most mundane objects, when woven into the stories of a community, gain a life beyond their original use. There are real records of chamberpots with painted dates, family names, or even brief poems inscribed around their rims. Objects transformed from mere tools into keepsakes, their histories sewn to those of the people who used them. Historians still argue whether such objects helped shape the character of a household or simply reflected it. But here in Bramblewick, you sense the truth is somewhere in between. A quirky tidbit arrives on a whisper from the past. In some rural manners, the return of a long-missing object would be celebrated with a tiny feast, or at the very least, a mug of warm cider by the fire. In Bramblewick, that custom has taken root in its own way, through laughter, through story, and through the patient, shared ritual of retelling a sleepy scandal that, for a little while, made everyone feel just a bit more awake, alive, and together. As you watch the flames in the hearth flicker and fade, you realize that what lingers is not the mystery itself, but the soft bonds woven by laughter, inconvenience, and a story retold with every telling. The Chamberpot caper will be remembered not for its absurdity, but for the way it turned a simple, everyday object into a vessel for joy, unity, and gentle mischief. And so, as the last embers glow and the manor drifts toward sleep, you let the gentle echoes of the tale carry you into your own dreams, knowing that some stories, no matter how small, can warm even the longest of nights. Now, as the story draws to a close and the manor quiets once again, you allow your senses to sink into the comforting hush that fills every timbered room. The drama and laughter have melted into soft, familiar rhythms, the slow creak of a rocking chair, the low sigh of the wind against thick glass, the distant crackle of logs as they settle into glowing embers. You sense the gentle breathing of a house at rest, a peacefulness that invites you to loosen your grip on the day's concerns, just as the residents of Bramblewick have done with the passing of their peculiar scandal. The Chamberpots, their great adventure, now behind them, sit unassumingly in their appointed places, carrying no trace of drama, except perhaps a quiet, secret pride, the villagers, children, grown-ups, even the animals move through their evening with a certain contentment, each soul feeling a touch more connected for having shared in a story that was, at its heart, about nothing and everything all at once. The air in Bramblewick seems to glow a little warmer, colored by memory, good humor, and the kind of camaraderie that grows from weathering life's little disruptions together. You picture Sir Oswald climbing the stairs for the night, his slippers soft against the stones, candle in hand, pausing just for a moment at the top to give the Chamberpot a solemn nod. Down in the kitchen, old Maudie puts the finishing stitch in a scarf she'll never quite finish, content with the slow, unhurried passage of time. The children's laughter dwindles, replaced by the sup murmur of a bedtime story. The cadence soothes and reassures. Even the cook, her hands finally still, leans back in her chair, eyes half closed, heart full. As the manor fades into darkness, you notice how the little story of the pot lingers in the air, less a memory now than a quiet blessing, a sign that all is well, that the world for tonight is gentle and forgiving. You breathe in deeply, letting the peacefulness settle in your chest, and know that sleep will come easily, cradled by the ordinary magic of people, place, and shared history. So, as you rest, let your mind drift with the slow rhythm of Bramblewick's night, the soft flutter of curtains, the gentle clatter of a distant spoon, the quiet companionship of stories told and retold in the hush of a home at peace. In this stillness, worries grow small, laughter lingers, and even the smallest scandal can become a lullaby, guiding you gently toward rest. Good night, dear listener. May your own dreams be touched by gentle adventures and laughter shared. All is calm, all is well, all is well.